Hello, hello, hello. Thanks for joining. It's the Jim Jackson Show. It's another great opportunity for us to catch up. You can catch us catch me on Instagram at Jim Jackson Show, but also youtube.com, Rich Eisen Show, or wherever you download your favorite podcast. I do appreciate you coming in. There's a lot going on post All-Star break, less than 30 games left in the season with the NBA. A lot of movement still going on in the Western Conference. Talk about that a little bit just because of what happened with, of course, the trade with Luka and AD kind of shuffles the tables a little bit. I think that's going to have an impact later as we wind down this second half of the season kind of placements. And the league is all about matchups a lot of times. And when you look at the Western Conference at the top of the charts, OKC, Memphis, it's right up in there. Denver, who started off slow, is now finding health and momentum and a continuity that makes them tough. And then it just falls down to Lakers. You have the Clippers. You have Houston in there. So Minnesota still with question marks. So the Western Conference, unlike the East, where at the top of the table, you got Boston and Cleveland, who are two of the most dominant teams that seem unbeatable. You thought maybe the Knicks had a really good shot to maybe take out the Celtics, but because of lack of depth, I think their offense is struggling a little bit more. Defense is not as impactful as it was last year, especially from the depth perspective. I think you lost something, with Hardenstein, of course, with his toughness that he had, and DiVincenzo with his toughness. They brought a certain amount of grit. The East is not as, what I would say, competitive at the top as the West is. So it's a lot of things going on. But I say strap in because it's going to be very interesting going down the stretch. Health, is going to be a really big influence on both sides of the table. Milwaukee healthy enough with their move. Giannis, Kyle Kuzma fills in. Does he give you that extra spark, that youthfulness that you need to compete the top two teams in the East? And in the West, the Luka, LeBron combination. Gabe Vincent is finally playing. Jared Vanderbilt, Austin Reeves. Does it give you enough to really compete with a Denver, with an OKC and Memphis? So I'm very interested to see kind of how all of that plays out as we walk our way into the end of the season. And speaking about the season, very disappointing one for the New Orleans Pelicans. And I'm going to jump into that. And the reason why I brought it up is I got a really good friend of mine, Antonio Daniels, who's from Columbus, Ohio, played at Bowling Green University, 4th pick in the 1997 draft, 14-year NBA vet, and now current TV lead analyst for the Pelicans. We're going to dive into a little bit more about the thought process, philosophy, the future, not just of the Pelicans, but also of Zion Williamson. As promised, welcome to a good friend of mine I want to welcome to the show, Antonio Daniels. Right now, 14-year NBA vet, current lead analyst for the New Orleans Pelicans, really good friend, number 4 pick in the NBA draft. What was that, 97? 90? Man, we old, bro.
Man, who you telling, bro?
And look, out of Bowling Green University. But, man, listen, I'm glad you made it safe to Phoenix. Thanks for jumping on. I know on travel days we got our own routines, but I'm glad you could step on and speak to me a little bit. Listen, you guys, you do a phenomenal job when we first start this off, a phenomenal job on SiriusXM Radio, kind of balancing basketball, I think the psychological part of the game, what these young athletes are going through, having a little fun with it. Did you ever think that from the perspective of playing basketball, one, you'd be doing the radio, two, but also doing the TV as well?
No, to be completely honest with you. I'm going to be honest
Same way,
Jim.
Me too, bro.
Jim, you know, man, when I was still playing, when you get to that point in your career where you start thinking about life after basketball. So I did the Sportscaster University at Syracuse while I was still playing. Like, you know what? Let me give this a shot. Let me give it a shot. Let me see if I like the whole media thing. So it's about 4 or 5 days. They take you through television training, radio training, all these different kind of scenarios that they put you in. And I tell you what's amazing. You never really realize what goes into someone's craft until you actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everything looks so much easier from the outside in. Like, oh man, I could do what that guy does. When you watch game analysts and when you see men and women on Sports Center and these other shows, you just figure they just get up there and talk. There's an amount of preparation that goes into it. There's an amount of concentration that goes into it. And I remember I left Sportscaster University. And I said, well, you know what? I'm glad I tried it. I just don't think this is for me.
Right.
But God had other plans.
Listen, it's funny because same kind of thing. I didn't take – when I was playing, I did like a radio show when I was in Dallas and Portland, did some TV stuff. And then because early in my career with the Mavericks and some of the teams when I didn't make the playoffs, I would do ESPN, Roy Firestone during the playoffs, TNT during the playoffs. But I never thought about that as a second career. And then I kind of just fell into it. And when I retired in 2006 and the Big Ten Network started in 2007. Now, I didn't take any formal classes, but one thing I did do, Tonio, was I hired a broadcasting agent. Okay? And that, well, not just an agent, but I hired a broadcasting coach.
Oh, okay.
Coach. Okay, because the coach allowed me to see this profession through a different lens, you know, because it's the difference between what we do in the game compared to studio, compared to what you do on radio, how you study, the quick hits you do in studio compared to what happens in the game, what kind of verbalization that you're going to use. All of these things, these small little nuances, you know, how to address the camera, you know, where to put your earpiece, all this kind of stuff, how to continue to talk and concentrate when somebody's talking in your ear.
Right.
All these little things and how to study and prep, had no idea about. But the coach was able to walk me through that. Did you said you hired a coach too?
No, I hired an agent. I didn't hire a coach.
Okay.
I learned on the fly, JJ.
Yeah.
Jimmy, I learned on the fly. And when the radio part for me, I'll be honest, the radio part was easier because in radio, it's really personality and you don't have to be on. You know what I mean? Like you can actually do radio, you know, at home with sweats on in a recliner chair. You don't have to be on. But for television, you actually have to be on. So everything that you do is being recorded. You know, your mannerisms,
yes,
how you smile, when you smile, where are you looking? Are you looking at the right camera? All these other kind of things. And I remember initially, it's almost like it's a weird dynamic when you first start doing TV because you don't want to smile too much. You don't want to smile too little. You want to make sure you're looking in the right camera. You want to make sure you're talking to the right people. All these other kind of things. When do I look at the person who's my host? And when am I looking at the actual audience? When am I smiling? When am I not smiling? So it's a lot of, like you said, it's a lot of nuances that go into really more the TV side than the radio side for me. But I tell you this, you know, God's not going to send you somewhere where he hasn't prepared you to succeed. And putting me in radio first, that kind of set me up for television. So now when they tell me, you know what, we're on television and we have to fill 45 seconds, like that's simple because, you know, I do a 3-hour radio show every day on SiriusXM. So filling time in television is a lot easier because I was prepped for that, for television by radio.
No, I get it, man. And radio is different too, because with TV, a lot of stuff that we do because the game is ongoing, you got to get in and out. You got to play off your play-by-play. Right. You got to get your points. And a lot of times people don't realize you get a chance to really hit a point during the timeout or during the dead ball, okay, or coming out of, let's say, halftime where you can kind of, depending on what's going on, but how much time you have coming back into that second half, kind of break down what happened. But you don't have a lot of time really to articulate a lot of things you want to say. But during the radio show, and I did radio too for Sirius, you got those segments, you can really break those segments down and really dive into some really deep conversations. And I think that's the really push and pull because you got a really good dynamic. You're able to really forecast, predict, talk about, dive into, dissect during the week, but then you're able to utilize a lot of that prep work and study when you're analyzing games too. Am I right with that?
Oh gosh, yeah. You're talking about two totally different dynamics because you're right. Like, and the thing that you keep referencing that's so true is you keep saying people don't realize. Yeah, people don't realize. I didn't realize. So when I'm on TV with my broadcast partner, Joe Myers, I have to make a quick point. When my job and your job as an analyst isn't to tell the what, it's to tell the how and the why.
Yep.
Why did this happen? How did this happen? But you have to learn to articulate it really quickly because you don't have 2.5 minutes like you do in radio to actually sit down, sit back, dissect, break down a point. No, I got to tell what happened because I got to get it out quick because next thing you know, they're on to the next play already.
Yeah.
Basketball is a very, very fast moving sport. In the radio, if we are talking about something, I know that I have a segment, a block in radio, a first segment in radio is anywhere from 20 to 25 minutes. That gives me enough time to actually gather my thoughts and be able to articulate everything that I want to say. Throughout the course of a game, sometimes I'm not given that time. Yeah. I'm trying to make a point, and my producer's in my ear like 9, 8, 7, 6,
yep.
5. You got to make that point and get out on time. Yep. Right.
Wrap it up. So, and the difference too with football, you have more time because you got dead periods during the game.
Right.
When after a play, that's why the Tony Romos, the Troy Aikmans of the world, they got a chance to really dive into and explain because when the play is over, you got 30 seconds, the play clock. Then you can explain a lot of stuff that's going on. So they have it now. You got to memorize a lot more stuff, I think, in football because of all the moving parts. But again,
and a lot of players.
And the players. But it is a difference, and the sports are going to vary. But I try to listen to a little bit of everybody in every sport so I can gather something. And speaking of articulation, I need you to articulate on this because you do such a great job, you and Joel, with New Orleans. Such heavy expectations coming into this year. Of course, with the trade of B.I., with the injury situation, what's the state of the union, the mindset right now with the Pelicans organization?
Growth. And I know that sounds simplistic. Like, yeah, of course it is. I'm not going to give you the run-of-the-mill answer, but it is. Right now, obviously, with the Pelicans sitting where they are now in the Western Conference, and I don't even know if they're mathematically eliminated yet, but the chances of them making the play-in or the playoffs are, very slim to none, if any at all. So now what you're more concerned with is obviously finishing this year healthy, one, but also paying attention to the growth and giving reps to the growth and progression of certain guys, right? Trey Murphy has made a significant jump from where he was a year ago. And again, I always knew Trey Murphy was talented, but the jump that he's made this year as far as ball handling, facilitating, and scoring the basketball is concerned, I didn't see it coming. You know me, Jimmy. You know me. I am a half glass full guy. I'm an optimist. In every situation, in every storm, there's a silver lining. You just got to find it. Trey Murphy has been a silver lining this year. Yves Missi will be in the running for Rookie of the Year and will probably be first team all rookie. Had a great year, but it wasn't expected because of what you just said. The expectations coming in for this team this year from day one, literally from day one, we had training camp in Nashville. The second day of training camp, Trey Murphy pulled his hamstring. It was all downhill from there. It was Trey Murphy. Then it was DeJounte Murray. And then it was Zion. And then it was B.I. And then it was C.J. McCollum. Then it was Herb Jones. Then it was DeJounte Murray again. So this is one of those years. It's just one of those years where you grow, you learn, and you try and put it behind you while learning in the process.
Well, let me ask you this from a philosophical perspective. We saw what happened, and we'll get into the Dallas thing with Luka, a trade that shocked not just the NBA but the sports world in general.
Right.
With an organization saying that our 25-year-old once-in-a-lifetime phenom, we're not willing to do this. We're willing to give him up. And he hasn't been through kind of the injury cycle that Zion has been through there at the Pelicans. Is there any fear from within? Again, I don't want to put you in a situation, but outside noise about that. What is the time frame for making a decision with Zion moving forward with his continued, not that he can't play, but with his continued injury history?
I don't think there's a fear there as far as separation is concerned from Zion, from the organization. It's this, Jimmy. Growth isn't linear. The light comes on for different players at different times throughout the course of their career. Like, none of us learn the same. We all learn differently. And what this performance team and coaching staff is trying to come up with is a game plan that works best for Z. That's what they're trying to do. Find a game plan that works best for him. And by what I mean when I say works best for him, I mean what keeps him on the floor longer in a consistent manner. If you look at this season, he's averaging 28 minutes a game. But in those 28 minutes, he's averaging a career high in points. In rebounds and a career high in assists. Last year he played 70 games. But that gets overshadowed by and it's warranted, overshadowed by the fact that this Pelicans team won 49 games, made it to the play-in game. He was having a great game against the Lakers and then pulled his hamstring and wasn't available for the playoffs. Like, the thing that sucks is he's such a good kid. Amazing young man. And what happens in this social media era, it's so easy to come down on the kid and just go hard on the kid, all these other kind of things. And I know for me, seeing this young man every day, getting on the bus with him, getting on the plane with him, all these different kind of situations that you're put in with him, I just want to see him succeed. I know what that young man's capable of. You ain't seen many of these. I'm telling you, God is in heaven, and there are certain guys that he says, listen, man, I'm going to give you a little bit more than I've given everybody else. Talent, agility, strength, power, explosiveness, soft touch around the rim, all these other kind of things. And once the health comes to, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. But I'm going to take my player's hat off and go to the organization side. At one point, do we say this may be delaying our total progress as an organization? And this is something the front offices always talk about. Okay, what is our time frame? Okay, we know we have a 4 to 5 year period to really grow with this core group. Okay, but if we're not getting consistent minutes from this group, we have to look at it. Heck, Philly going to have to figure out what they want to do with Embiid. I really think, after this year, because of what's going on. And I would hate to see it, but I do know, and we've both been through trades and moves and what we just saw, that organizations' timelines sometimes accelerates based on some external pressure and maybe some internal pressure as far as where the organization has to be. And I'm wondering, as much as that game plan is there, that, and this is not a question for you to answer, and I'm just thinking out loud, this understanding how organizations think, that, okay, we've exhausted everything we can from the patient's perspective, from the physical perspective, from getting Zion back to where we really need him to get to, but yet something still happens. Is this the time, and I'm not saying this year, but maybe next year, depending on what happens, that we cut the cord and move forward? I don't know. It's just my observation, just thinking of both sides of the table. And I know you work with the group, and I work with the Lakers. With the Clippers. And there's certain things that I say, and I know because I work for the organization, that I got to be careful with. Okay, but that's my fear, not my fear, but my thoughts when I think about Zion and the organization.
For me, I feel like it's a matter of time. And again, call me an optimist, call me biased. I feel like it's a matter of time before it comes together for this young man full circle. We've seen it a few times.
Because we saw when he came in, he lost the weight. He looked bouncy, he looked good. The question is, can his body hold up consistent? Not just one year with 70.
Right. The thing is, no one knows that.
Yeah.
Because, when you say, can you think of, so if I was to ask you, Jimmy, give me someone in the history of this league that has all of the physical attributes of Zion in one person.
Ooh. I mean, I would say Charles Barkley. Because you got to think about it. I mean, Charles could rebound, run, jump. He could shoot it. He had high IQ for the game.
For sure. I will say this, though. Zion's bouncier than Charles Barkley.
Well, yeah, but you said attributes. I'm
but that's a part of the physical attributes.
But we're not saying who got the highest vert. Charles was bouncy. He's not as bouncy as he's not as bouncy. We know that.
So you know what's difficult is when you have a one-of-one, and this is not a conversation that's just excluded to Zion. When you look at somebody like Victor Wembanyama, right? There are certain guys throughout the history of the sport that are one-of-one. So now it's almost like these guys become, you can't train them the way you do everybody else because you've never had anybody like them. Like all athletes aren't the same.
Well,
all of our bodies
all body types are different. Training is going to be different.
Right. So like when people say, well, you know what, Greg Popovich coached Tim Duncan and David Robinson. You know what, Tim Duncan and David Robinson aren't Victor Wembanyama.
Exactly. Totally different.
They're not.
Totally different.
Right? As far as their body type, the way that they play. So you have to take a different approach to these guys. And listen, when you have a performance staff that's trying to put in place a plan for a young man that is 6'5" and that bouncy, that athletic, and that explosive, that plays with that amount of power, it's a first for them too. So I think this is a situation, and again, this is not simply excluded to Zion. You see this with different players throughout this league, where performing staff, training staff, and doctor staff, and even some coaching staff, they're learning on the fly because this is a first.
No, I got you, man. But for me, I love to see the young men who have potential, but young men have an opportunity to reach their full potential. A lot of times we've seen a lot of that being derailed because of injury. So hopefully, his body, he continues to mature and grow, and his body can sustain a lot of that pressure that he puts on it and continues to grow. And, I want to transition, though, because I know you were traveling today, but last night, did you watch the Lakers Dallas game? So it was a reunion game, kind of, because it wasn't in Dallas. It was in L.A. Dallas went and played the Lakers. Initial thoughts when you watched the game?
Almost to be expected. To be expected. Like you knew Luka was going to come out and he was going to show his tail. You knew it. He was going to show his tail. And by show his tail, I mean he was going to play an emotional basketball game.
Yeah.
If you watch the press conference that Luka had with Rob Pelinka right after he was traded, he was still shocked.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it in his face. His body language.
No question. He almost looked hurt still. Hurt to the point where I can't believe this has actually happened to me.
Yep.
And what I'm seeing from Luka now is a young man that is coming to the realization that I got to put Dallas behind me. I got to put it behind me. I think one of the toughest things to do when you don't know any better is to understand the business of basketball and to understand that the business of basketball a lot of times trumps basketball itself. Because you can't think of the history of this sport where there has been a 25-year-old phenom as good as Luka, as dominant as Luka, as skilled as Luka, that was 5-time first-team All-League, that was moved this early in his career without asking to be moved. So like you said earlier, and you hit it on the head, Jimmy, this isn't a trade that shocked the world. I mean, that shocked the basketball world. This is a trade that shocked the world as a whole. I remember when I heard this trade, I thought it was a joke. Like, yeah, right.
I know. You had to check to make sure that Shams' account wasn't hacked, right? Yep. Everybody, at first thing everybody said, like, no, this got to be a fake account. This got to be fake something.
Yeah, I even called a couple people.
Right.
Like, did you hear this thing about Luka? Do you believe this? Do you believe this? And, I'll be completely honest. I'll be completely honest and transparent. It wasn't simply the fact that Luka got traded. It was the fact that after watching Kevin Durant get moved and Rudy Gobert get moved and Mikal Bridges get moved and all the haul that those guys got brought back, I love Anthony Davis. great player, fantastic player, will be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But when you trade someone like Luka to get Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a one first round pick, it wasn't just the fact that Luka got traded that I thought like, okay, whatever. It was the fact that Luka got traded and they only received that man who is a heck of a player, right? I don't want to sound like I'm down talking him because I feel like he makes Dallas better today than they were when they had Luka for this season, for the immediate future. But Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a first round pick, if I'm a Mavericks fan and I see what Kevin Durant brought in, and I see what Mikal Bridges brought in, and I see what Rudy Gobert brought in, it's tough.
Yeah, it's tough, but when I first heard it too, but then I had to put this in perspective, Antonio. This is a business deal by a business family, the Adelsons. This wasn't. Now, I believe they gave autonomy to Nico to make a deal happen, and he knew where he could go to get something that made sense because of Rob Pelinka and AD. He knew that probably AD wasn't as happy in the current situation when he was in LA. He probably wasn't happy. So they could get this deal done without blowing it up, without understanding the mechanics of that. But when you look at it from the Dallas perspective, this is just me thinking from a business perspective. Their whole thing is stay in contention, win now, try to win. We got a bigger picture brewing here with everything else that's going on. The Dallas Mavericks, to me, are a small piece of the puzzle for the Adelson family, okay, with their history with the casino. It's a bigger play going to me after reading and trying to understand how they made their money. The Mavericks are a piece of the puzzle that fit into their overall business plan. So when you see a deal like this, you scratch your head and you're like,
yes.
Man, it doesn't make sense to us. But to the people that's inside that room that sat there and talked about what the future of this organization is going to look like and business-wise, it probably makes sense to them. And at the end of the day, Tonio, that's all that matters.
You know what's wild, though? I agree with you.
Right.
Because when you say scratching your head, I think that's an understatement. Because you know this. You know this more than anybody. You know what organizations will do? When your impact outweighs your baggage, they'll rock with you.
Yeah, they'll rock with you.
So when you hear all this stuff coming about Luka, it's conditioning and his lack of professionalism and beer, like, listen, man, organizations have dealt with far more
for more than
less.
that. Oh, big time.
Yes.
Big time.
Organizations have dealt with far more with players that won on Luka's caliber. You know, so that's what's difficult. That's what's difficult for me to kind of, because I guess I'm accustomed to the NBA operating a certain way. But I tell you this, to take this conversation in another direction, these Supermax deals.
Oh, well, about to be gone, bro.
Deals,
about to be gone.
And that's another piece of this that I know fans hate to hear, but you have to understand what this means. $350 million for Luka. Cade Cunningham's going to come in $400 million. You know, Victor Wembanyama is, who knows? When you're talking about playing players this kind of money, it's not simply about what you're giving that particular player. It's also about what you're able to put around that player because of the amount of the salary cap that money takes up.
Yes,
Again,
exactly.
For me, it's like paying a really good quarterback a whole lot of money. But now I don't have money to pay an offensive line to protect him, and I don't have money to pay receivers for him to throw the ball to. Now, he's great. The quarterback is fantastic. He's skilled, and he has a great arm, but I can't protect him, and I didn't give him any weapons to throw the ball to. So now what? These Supermaxes is going to change they're going to change the game, Jimmy. Well, these Supermaxes are going to change the game.
Let me tell you a couple of things I'm going to walk down the street with you on this one. A couple of things. One, the NBA always, for a long time, been trying to get rid of guaranteed contracts. They can't do it. But they went from 10-year deals down to 6-year deals, now down to 5 and 4. Okay? Now, those are for really those, not the super max deal, but the max deals, the big-time contracts. Your big-time players go get it. But also what they did, Tony, if you paid attention the last couple of years, they shortened the deal. They got options in there. So like I said this about Bruce Brown. So when he signed and left Denver and went to Indiana, he had a 2-year deal, $45 million. But only 1 year was guaranteed. Okay? The other was a team option. Okay? It was Jock Longdale, I think it was, that went from Phoenix. No, not
Houston.
He got a 4-year deal, $32 million. Only 1 year was guaranteed. Okay? So what they're starting to do is control the length of these contracts. May not be guaranteed, but they're only locked in for a year or two.
It's like football contracts.
It's just like
Those
football.
Are like football contracts.
So the NBA can't get rid of the guaranteed contract, but what we do is we shorten the term, so now teams are not locked in as long, so they still have some flexibility to move, and they're not locked into a player. And that max deal, like now, it's harder through free agency to get stuff done. Why? Guys want to sign a big-time deal, okay, and then force their way out. So now trades are going to be more relevant and prevalent and more impactful, I think, moving forward. Because guys are going to say, with my squad here, well, let me sign my big-time deal first, and then I'll force my way out, rather than the free agency.
Okay. Can you see the NBA going toward a place where if you do sign a max contract, that you can't ask to be traded for 2 years?
Of course they'll ask it, but with the Players Association, that's not gonna fly. And this is where the battle is gonna come in, because it's so much money that's gonna be coming in. Now listen, soccer, big time soccer is different. Okay, what they pay and how they do it. Okay. Mm-hmm. But with basketball, and I don't care how big these TV contracts are, you start getting towards that second apron. Listen, I work for the Clippers. The greatest owner to me is Steve Ballmer, because of how much he cares. But he's also the richest. Steve Ballmer doesn't want to go into the second apron. Okay? And you talking about billions. So if he doesn't want to go into it, and an owner that doesn't have that, definitely. If they're going to play in it, they're going to play in it, see if they can win. If they do, they're going to get out. Look at what Denver did. Okay? Denver didn't want to go and start to pay and overpay a Jeff Green or a Bruce Brown and things. Exactly. They say, let us try to manage what we have, build what we have in our young guys, but stay below, out of the luxury tax.
Do you think that's fair to Nikola Jokic?
What's fair in basketball? Come on.
No, I get it. I'm saying, like, when there are certain guys that command more than others. What I mean is there are certain guys that you have a championship window that's going to close quickly.
Oh, but let me say this,
your job as an organization is to do right by that particular player.
But let me say this. Would it be different if Jokic had a different personality and commanded, let's say, like LeBron? See, because he doesn't complain. He doesn't want to fight about stuff. He's happy to play. Don't get me wrong, he's a competitor. Right. But because his demeanor and personality is soft-spoken, it's more docile, the organization doesn't feel that pressure. Now, that was somebody else that said, listen, man, you got to do something. That puts more pressure on the organization.
For sure.
I don't think, now that's a great question and yes, they should spend the money. But I think each circumstance is different depending on the player. It's like LeBron, his presence and what he commanded, you had to go out there and make some changes. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. But because of who he was and what he demanded from the organization, a Kobe, from what you demand from the organization, now you're put on more pressure. But when you have an individual who's great like Jokic, but his personality is a lot different, I don't know if they feel that same pressure.
Right. That's fair.
I don't know, man. It's going to be interesting, man. And then, as we talk about this too, and what I really want to get into too, and we're talking about, the young players are getting paid in free agency before we get out of here. But you had a great conversation last week on radio talking about the current generation and how it's perceived compared to the older generations, and how each side has a leg to stand on, but the understanding part of both is where we're missing the point. And the two can coincide, but it's, well, you're not better because of this, and you're not better because of this, but not understanding the dynamics of both. And what I'm saying like this, in today's world, you got to meet a young person where they're at, okay? I can't expect them to understand what it's like to play in the park, to play in the gym, to have to wait if you lose, these things like that, they're not privy to. They used to play in AAU, playing multiple games, being on different teams, okay, making decisions like that, playing with the three ball, not posting up. That's what. That's how they play. That's how they view the game.
That's how they were raised.
And
that's how they were raised.
And that's how they were. So I can't fault them for seeing the game like that. I try to help guide them through it, but I think too many times it's like, Antonio, well, you need to play like this. What's your thoughts on that?
I think the biggest issue with trying to think of the right way to say this. I don't tell my daughters. I don't say to my daughters anymore, when I was your age, I fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do that. Because it's almost like when they hear when I was your age, it's almost like they turn their hearing off.
Yep.
Like this generation doesn't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. And I get it. When I said that to my daughters in the past, like, man, when I was your age, and my daughters would say things like, well, Dad, when you were my age, did you have a phone? Like, no.
Exactly.
When you were my age, did you have the internet? Like, no.
No.
Dad, when you were my age, did you have a car? No. Okay, look, I understand what you're saying, but we're being raised in two completely different worlds. And it's true. And I think it's difficult sometimes for my generation and generations that are older to understand this generation because of how we were raised to do things, because of how we were raised to see things, and because of the way that we were raised to play the game of basketball. There's more than one way to play the game of basketball, but we feel, and so many people I've talked to feel like if you don't do it this way, there is no other way. Example, in today's NBA, when you grew up, Jimmy, a 3-on-1 ended up in a what?
Layup. And if it didn't, you was running suicides or something.
A 3-on-1 today ends up in a what?
3-point shot.
Right. And here's my thing. We got to adjust our goggles.
Yep.
And understand we're not playing the game the way that they played it. They didn't learn the game the way we did.
Nope.
It doesn't mean that they're wrong. I tell you, I think the biggest issue, mainly from a basketball perspective, that this generation runs into is, and I can even say in a life conversation, it's when the respect is not there. When that respect is not there. That's the problem. So when the generation of today disrespects those of the past, when you hear guys in today's generation or a generation removed in today's NBA, and they're talking greasy about, the Bob Cousy's and the Bill Russells and the Wilt Chamberlain, the guys whose shoulders that you stood on to actually get to this point, the Oscar Robertsons, these guys. You understand what some of these players had to deal with? The Kareem Abdul-Jabbars, what these players had to deal with off the floor.
Yep. So
you have an opportunity to get paid what you're being paid today. And I think when the respect isn't given, I think that's where it hits different for me. Because I'm with you. Yeah. I feel like our generation can meet them where they are. And in turn, their generation can appreciate what they've been blessed with because of those that have come before them and have given them the opportunity to be where they are today.
You make the point you make there, I think the respect part. Because if they respected the older generation in a more admirable way, and we're not going to put everybody
in the same, right. You're not paying everybody with the same brush.
Exactly, because that's not the case. But I believe if it was more of a consensus, the older generation wouldn't mind as much how they play because they would see it a little bit different because they felt like, okay, you guys grew the game off of what we did. But since you're not giving me the respect, you're really not understanding what we had to go through. It was somebody one time was talking about, and this is you got to understand certain situations and demographics and time periods. Somebody said, well, LeBron James or the current athlete would never be another Muhammad Ali or a Kareem or a Bill. I said, you're right. I said, you know why? Not because they don't want to do anything politically correct. It's because the narratives in which a Bill Russell, a Muhammad Ali, a Malcolm X lived in, They lived in a segregated neighborhood. They lived in those environments. They experienced those same things that everyday people outside of being an athlete did every day. They had to take it home with them. So when they did their job, sports-wise, they went back to that black neighborhood and they experienced all of the ills of the times, okay, during that time. Our current athletes, and even me growing up, I experienced it, but not like that, not in the 60s. So the perspective is different. So when I go for perspective on both ends, when I talk to older guys who played the game before, and it always talking about the younger guys, and vice versa, I said, you got to understand each perspective and respect that, okay?
Jimmy, you know why I don't like having the GOAT conversation? You know why I hate it? Like, and you know, it's an ongoing conversation, whether it's through SiriusXM, any platform, in a barbershop. Everybody want to talk about who's the GOAT. I get asked that question a million times. You know why I don't like having that conversation? Because everybody that's in the GOAT conversation, or everybody that should be in the GOAT conversation, had to endure and deal with something that someone else can't relate to.
Totally.
So it's not fair, right? So what Bill Russell had to deal with, what Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had to deal with, is not what Michael Jordan and LeBron James had to deal with. You know what Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bill Russell and Michael Jordan didn't have to deal with? Social media. But LeBron James does. I'm not like, you think LeBron and Michael Jordan can even fathom pulling up to a hotel with your teammates and them telling you, because you are black, you cannot sleep in this hotel? No. We don't know what these players had to endure. We don't know what these players had to deal with. I heard Bill Russell say, you know what, when I was in between those lines, I felt like I was a part of everybody else. And like you just said, when I stepped back out and went in the world, I was treated unfairly.
Yeah, treated unfairly. Yep.
Yeah, so I don't like having these GOAT conversations because there's nuance to them. It's not, the GOAT is not simply about basketball. You know, when you talk about what Michael Jordan has done and how he grew the game, what LeBron James has done as far as player empowerment is concerned, like it's so many different areas you can go. I think that there are different GOATs for their respective generations. Yeah. And I'll leave it at that.
No. You know, and that part, Tonio, for me that's why it's hard to really talk about. Well, I think you have to honor the generations that came before.
Sure.
And respect the young players and what they're doing today. The comparative part, here's the thing, too, with Kobe and Mike. Well, LeBron doesn't have a killer instinct. Well, Magic didn't either, not like LeBron and Kobe, but he beat you in different ways. He beat you with that smile. Now, he got into you, but his attitude, his demeanor, his approach was a lot different. You don't think Magic was friendly with some guys, but he went at him. He went at him. You know what I'm saying? But when people talk about that.
It also depends on what your definition of killer instinct is. Because a lot of people feel like killer instinct means I'm going to take the last shot.
Yeah.
When LeBron James runs 70 feet and blocks Andre Iguodala's shot to win the game, that's killer instinct. Killer instinct.
I was fortunate to play against the prime Michael Jordan, prime Kobe. It was a little early for LeBron, but I appreciate exactly everything that he does. I understand what motivated and why people love Kobe and Mike so much. I've seen it. I played with it. I felt it. And I'm not going to argue otherwise with regards to who they are and why they set the standard so high. But I also understand that there's a difference in mentality in how you win. Okay? And looking at it from not so much of a closed tunnel vision of you have to be this kind of player or have this kind of attitude in order to be this kind of person, you know, I just don't. So, but we're always going to have that conversation, unfortunately, because it gets clicked and get people talking.
Right,
but,
for sure.
You know, I think I appreciate what came before me, and I do appreciate a lot of the young talent that I see today because of how dynamic they are, men and women, of what they're doing, what they have to deal with. Now, there's still things they got to learn. There's still things, their growth has to be there. But I try to catch them, speak with them, appreciate them and meet them where they're at today. So I appreciate that. Hey, before we get out of here, be remiss before I say this. Eastern Conference. Can Cleveland beat Boston? I ain't hear you. You said, Can they?
Well, here's the question.
What?
Can Cleveland beat Boston 4 times?
Okay, that's even better. I'm asking you.
Yeah, and the thing is, I was down in Cleveland for training camp.
Okay.
For Sirius XM.
Yeah.
And the vibes were great. We sat down with everybody. My radio partner Rob Perez and I. Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, Kobe Altman, Kenny Atkinson. We sat down with all of them. And when the Pelicans played in Cleveland, I went in the locker room after the game and I sat down with Donovan Mitchell. And I was just kind of just joking with him and say, man, you know what? Y'all rolling, huh? And this was earlier in the year.
Right.
And he said, you know what, man? I thought we would be good. I didn't think we would be this good. And I'm with him. I didn't think they would be this good. But the question now becomes, can they get over that hump?
Yeah.
Because I think they are the second best team in the Eastern Conference. I think for a while it was like, oh, can New York challenge them? Can Milwaukee challenge them? I think those two teams in the Eastern Conference have separated themselves. And I'm going to be honest with you, Jimmy, it is really, really difficult right now to see another team in the Eastern Conference beating
one of those two?
Beating the Boston Celtics 4 times.
Oh, yeah. You know
4 times. And it helps. They got DeAndre Hunter.
Yeah.
That helps.
Yeah. You know what I liken it to? And this is the last thing before we get out of here, is that when Steve Kerr took over the Golden State Warriors, Mark Jackson kind of primed the pump. So that's what J.B. Bickerstaff did. But what people don't give those young men credit for is that they matured another year. So they were able to accept the new kind of coaching that Steve Kerr brought in, okay? Despite what happened, or you liked Mark Jackson, you didn't, whatever. They grew another year mentally. I see the same thing with, and what Steve Kerr did, he tweaked the system, got the ball out of Steph's hands as much, made it more free-flowing, opened it up, plugged in some pieces and made it work. Same thing with Cleveland. That now the coaching staff looked at it and said, they've matured another year. We have to utilize Evan Mobley in a different way. We got to utilize Jared Allen. We're going to allow Garland to be, but we're going to create a system where not everybody's playing off each other. And those young men in that locker room matured enough to understand that. And I think the combination of the two philosophies kind of meshed together, and we have the Cavs where they're at today.
And do you know what else helped? Is the fact that you don't have some of the issues hanging over the locker room that you had.
Oh, the contracts.
Right?
The contracts are signed.
Donovan Mitchell got extended. Jared Allen got extended. Evan Mobley got extended. What's the 3-man?
Who's Strus?
No. Gosh, his name is eluding me right now. Stronger guy that started at the 3 spot for them.
You're not talking about Max Strus?
No.
No.
No. That guy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
I'm
Josh
so sorry.
Josh is gone.
No.
Josh is gone.
Yeah, it's not Josh Okogie. No, it's not.
I know you're talking about. Yes.
Isaac Okoro.
Isaac Okoro. So they locked in their core, so there was no more questions about what direction we're going in.
Last year, and you know how that works. You know how that works in this league. You got contracts hanging over. The big question was, is Donovan Mitchell coming back? Remember, Jared Allen didn't even play in the postseason.
Yeah.
Right? Is he really engaged? Is he really coming back? Does he want to be a part? When you can take care of everybody financially, now you have a locker room that is built on peace. That's built on peace and camaraderie. It's a lot easier to go out and play when everybody in that locker room, contractually speaking, is taken care of.
Yeah. It's going to be, I think the West is a little bit more open, of course, just because, with Memphis getting better and OKC. Now, listen, if it starts today, the Lakers will play OKC in that first round, which would be very interesting, 1 versus 4. It'd be very interesting. I don't know about Minnesota. Defensively, they're not as good as they were last year. I think they do miss Cat from the perspective of what he brought to the table.
Offensively, they're not good as good either.
No. So the East is less intriguing just because those two teams are dominant. The West, you got a lot of questions. It goes back to matchups. It goes back to matchups and injuries and health. So it's going to be interesting, man. But I just wanted to thank you, bro, for coming on. Fellow Ohioan, of course, 14 years in the league. You've been through a lot. You've seen a lot. I know you dedicated your life to a higher purpose, and a lot of that is being shown through what you do on TV. So I appreciate you, brother. Good luck for the rest of the year. We're going to catch up soon.
For sure. You too, brother. Okay. You know how much I appreciate you.
Yeah, always, brother.
My man.
Man, that was a great conversation. I think perspective means a lot. No matter when I'm not just talking about in sports, but in life, especially older generation, younger generation. We get caught up into our times, our feelings, what's best. When we were younger, this was the best. But you got to keep in mind, when we were younger too, and I was younger, I thought the people behind me at times, generation before me, didn't understand what I was talking about until I got older. So great perspective from Antonio in that conversation and other things. But another great week of basketball coming up. March Madness is right around the corner. I'm getting ready, getting geared up for that. Always a great time. I wish you and everyone have a wonderful rest of the week. Got some great college games coming up this weekend. I got a good one, UCLA at Purdue. John Wooden started at Purdue, All-American. Of course, the legacy there at UCLA. It's a great NBA game. So I want you to enjoy the rest of the week. Be safe. Spread some love. Be kind. Be peaceful. And I'll see you next week.